In 1994, at the semi-finals of the Snooker Championship, the match is between Berman and Toolsidas, who the announcer describes as everyone's favorite. Toolsidas, accompanied by his 2 sons and wife, walks into the room, waving and smiling. The players shake it up and resume the game. He plays eagerly, encouraged by the cheers and smiles of his youngest son, Midi. Toolsidas wins the game against Berman easily, and promises that Midi will be the one to bring the trophy to him in the final game. Fellow members of the club draw near and invite Toolsidas to the bar for a drink. His wife frowns at this, saying they have to be at a wedding soon, but he promises to be back after just one drink. He asks her to wear a red sari, saying that she looks beautiful in it, and the family then leaves him at the club. Back home, Godi is Toolsidas' eldest son. He begs his mother for 80 rupees, exempting himself from the wedding, and says he will visit the fun fiesta instead, where his friends are waiting for him. She gives him 30 rupees instead, so he convinces Midi to request for 50 more rupees from her. Midi uses the words Godi taught him, saying that the wedding in view was not his, so as to get money from her. As they predicted, their mother gives Midi 30 rupees instead of 50. At the fun fiesta, the boys stop at a shooting booth. Godi asks for the betting rules, after the attendant tells him about the normal rules. They have to make 3 clean shots to triple their price for the balloons, or 5 times the original amount for the nails. Godi bets his money and predicts his shots. He gets the first 2, but loses the third one, ignoring Midi's warnings. He gives Midi the gun to try the next round, and the latter goes for the nails. Midi closes the first 2 shots, but sees that the attendant cheated by not adding any bullet for the third shot. So Midi exposes him by firing the gun at his head instead. When nothing happens, Godi takes the attendant's money and cartons of juice as revenge. They hide the juice behind an idol and sneak into the house. Godi warns Midi not to say anything about the gambling, and they find their mother seated quietly on the chair. Godi observes her, and they realize that their father wasn't back from the club, and they failed to attend the wedding. A call comes in from the club about his father's wasted state. Godi refuses to go get him, since his friends would be there, and her mother can't go, because Toolsidas would make a scene if he saw her. Midi leaves without a word, and finds his father at the bar, talking about the reason he plays the game with the club member from before. While taking him home, Toolsidas promises to get Midi long pants, since he is now a man. Midi reminds his father of the wedding, and he seems surprised. His wife gets very angry when he gets home and scolds him at the top of her voice. The boys try to tell her that she's too loud, but she shuts them up. We then see the sleeping arrangements of the family when the mother is done scolding him. She sleeps in the kids' room with Godi, while Midi sleeps next to his father in their room. The next day, their mother's anger subsided. Midi peeks at his father getting the group picture with other players, but he is interrupted by Godi. Godi tries to use Midi to make photocopies, saying that the final tournament isn't so important, as their father would never win against Jimmy Tandon, a very skilled player. Midi is optimistic that their father would win, but Godi mocks him. On the drive back home, Toolsidas presents Midi his first ever long pants, and he also learns the meaning of the word ambition. At the finals, Midi wears the long pants Toolsidas gifted him, but Godi doesn't attend the match. After the first 3 frames, Toolsidas leads with 3 points against Jimmy's 1 point. There's a 15-minute break, and Toolsidas leaves to use the washroom. Midi sneaks behind him, and is relieved that Toolsidas doesn't enter the bar. However, Toolsidas answers Jimmy's invitation to the bar. He takes a couple of drinks, and becoming drunk, he flunks the next frames, and Jimmy wins again. Toolsidas breaks the cue in anger, but Midi picks it up, and takes it to the marker remat in the next day. Midi isn't permitted to play at first, because he is still young, but another player named Tutu convinces the marker to allow him to play. Jimmy comes in later and stops them, because it isn't allowed to kids to play here. But Tutu comes up with an idea, and writes a permission letter to let Midi play every Friday. Midi is caught by Godi, who convinces him to play either cricket or badminton to make money. He accepts, and Godi becomes his manager. Godi enrolls him into a cricket club, but Midi can't play the game. They try badminton next, but Midi is bad at it too. Midi intends to put his father's name on the championship board. In the other hand, Godi tries to make him get into horse racing, but it is an equal disaster. Midi avoids Godi the next day, and runs into the snooker club. Godi gets sent out because he is wearing slippers, and Midi gets to play a game with Tutu. But he is terrible at it. After 3 Fridays of attending Tutu's games, Midi has gained nothing. Tutu fails his shot and refuses Midi's assurance that he's a good player. He tells Midi that great snooker players are made at YMC. Midi then convinces Godi to sponsor him to YMC. The experience at YMC Chowringhee is awful, with the no-talking policy, so they opt for YMC Wellington. The environment is unfriendly for people of Godi and Midi's age, but they find the club. Godi doesn't want Midi to play there, but Midi insists. Godi gives in and gets the YMC form for Midi, and even gives him transportation money. Midi is told to return in the morning to OK, as senior players play in the evening. He bunks off school by acting sick, and makes his way to YMC Wellington. He meets Muhammad Salam for the first time, and he is India's best national champion in snooker games. Midi plans to observe Salam play and learn from him, after one club member called Nandi gets slapped when he asks Salam to teach him. As Midi observes and learns, Salam notices him and starts giving him tips. Although his game is not yet strong, impatient Godi takes Midi to a game which he flops at. Godi gets angry and withdraws his support for Midi. Midi has to get money for himself against all odds, and tries carrying luggage for people, but Toolsidas sees this. His mother gives him money, and Toolsidas assures him that he can take as much money as he wants from his pockets. Back at YMC Wellington, Midi asks Salam why he always sleeps before every game. Salam, who never spits out his betel leaf to talk to anyone, spits it out for Midi. He encourages Midi to try it first. Midi tries it and is amazed. Midi tries to convince Salam to teach him more, but his persistent requests vex Salam. 2 players tease Midi by playing with his cue. He explains to them that the cue belongs to his father, and that his father is a champion. But they make fun of him, until Salam steps in and snatches the cue from their hands, and agrees to teach Midi every day from 11 AM. Salam explains that it helps him focus more, as the snooker game is all about focus. Midi learns most of Salam's tricks. He learns to make a bumper shot, the names of each cue ball according to their color, and the types of heroes in movies that demonstrate 3 types of power shots. Salam tells him he can play a frame, after practicing for 8 hours a day. Midi's joy is threatened when he learns that the family is traveling away to Darjeeling for the holidays. Midi gets angry and is unable to play, but Salam teaches him about anger and ego. Midi comes up with a plan and ends up staying back for extra lessons, while the rest of his family travels to Darjeeling. He catches Godi red-handed with a girl, and blackmails him to leave for Darjeeling. He continues his lessons with Salam once his family is out, and on the day his family is to return from Darjeeling, Midi loses his cue stick that he suffered to repair. He is sad and doesn't feel the joy of his reunited family, but Godi isn't mad at him, and promises to get another cue for him. Midi takes his dad's form for the coming championship to the club, and is unable to get one for himself. He goes to the bar to take his drunk father home, when Toolsidas makes a drunk bet of 2,000 rupees, and doesn't even put any effort into winning the money. When Godi hears this, he gets mad and takes Midi back to the club. He makes Midi finish the game, and win the money back. The president of the club also signs a championship form for Midi, and Godi promises his support for Midi in the championship. Midi tries to go to YMC Wellington the next day, but his mother grudgingly lets him go and trails him. She is stupefied to see where Midi has been frequenting, and tries to take him away. But Salam stops her and begs her to let Midi fly. She lets him go as per Salam's wish. Midi begs Salam to come to watch him play, and he agrees to come for the finals, since Midi said it will improve his game. The championship starts, and Midi makes it through 3 rounds to the quarterfinals, even defeating Tutu, who is confused by Midi's improvement. The next opponent is late, and Midi is winning without playing. Salam is pissed by this, because he would rather Midi played and lost than not play at all, and he tutors Midi on sportsmanship. For the semi-finals, Midi is to play against his own father. After the 15-minute break, Midi fails a shot with a black ball. Toolsidas shoots a foul, so the game goes in Midi's favor. Midi is pissed, thinking his dad intentionally lost. But Toolsidas explains that's not the case. He also promises to keep his end of their bargain and stop drinking, so that things can go back to normal in their family. In the finals, Midi is to face the tyrant Jimmy. Midi makes sure Salam gets a grand entry when he arrives, and wins the first 3 rounds of the game. During the break, he sits beside Jimmy at the bar and advises the old man to drink lemonade. This upsets Jimmy and he hurts Midi's hand. For the next rounds, Jimmy has leveled up to Midi while the latter keeps struggling. Salam notices this and demonstrates the use of the other hand to Midi before he leaves. Midi applies the trick to the final round and wins, ending a long winning streak of Jimmy. Toolsidas is shocked by everything. Midi runs all the way to YMC Wellington to hug Salam and inform him that he won. And Toolsidas takes the trophy for the first time to his home. Thanks for watching, take care, and see you in the next video.
Back in my bag and I gotta brag, I do this shit for real. When we was down and we had nothing, we had to share a meal. We put the shit in overdrive with no steering wheel.